So attending today, we've got colleagues across the public sector from economic development, from inward investment, from business support, also from major capital projects. So we've got representatives from the local authorities in the city region, from Scottish Enterprise, from Business Gateway and Scottish Futures Trust. So a really wide range of people to help us during our discussions today. So I'd like to introduce our three speakers today, and if they can maybe wave when I introduce them. So our first speakers will be from Scottish Gas Networks, will be Richard Buckley and Colin Thomson. Thank you. And after that, we will have Craig Arthur and Rachel Donoghue from Scottish Power Energy Networks. And at the not least, will be Alan Thomson from Scottish Water. Space I can see. Yeah, great. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Richard Buckley now for the first presentation. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Lorraine. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to meet you in the way that we meet these days over the Fable team. So yeah, Michelle, is the deck going to get shared, or do I need to share? Or
yes, no, it's going to be shared. Catherine's going to do that for you. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll crack on. So again, good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go through today a bit of an overview of SGN and try and answer some of those questions around the way we invest, what we do, the way we invest, and our connections process, and a little bit of detail. I've got some colleagues on the call that can help with questions in those areas. Should you have them going forward. So if we move to the first slide, please. Okay, thanks. So who are we? So at a group level, SGN operates 3 distribution networks, and we look after around 75,000 kilometres of gas pipes, and that's Scotland, Southern and Northern Ireland. You can see that in the orange sort of dotted areas. We provide a service to 5.9 million connections, and that serves around 14 million people, of which around 1.8 million of those customers are deemed as vulnerable customers. A couple of years ago, we passed the barrier of supplying 250,000 homes, or equivalent supplying them with biomethane, and by 2025 we're on target to supply an equivalent 400,000 homes, and we install around 22,000 connections each year, of which around 4,000 are funded connections for what's termed as fuel poor households. So that's a very high level view of what we do as a business. So next slide. Thank you. So SGN is a regulated business. Our activities and our revenue is regulated by Ofgem. We follow a set regulatory model, which is what's called the RIIO model, and that's effectively a very high level equation that says that our revenues are derived by incentives that are put on us, the need to innovate, and very specific outputs that we need to deliver. It includes those incentives include some very challenging targets around providing benefits to customers and the environment. And as you can see, we've just completed our first year of our 5-year price control formula. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a map of the wider Glasgow area as we see it, if you like, through our models. So the Glasgow region, this is the intermediate and medium pressure distribution network, and it consists of around 1,400 kilometres of distribution pipework. This infrastructure that you can see in the area supports around 800,000 gas customers. If we move on, please. So this is very similar to the previous slide, and this is a view of what we call the low pressure system, which predominantly feeds the domestic properties and a majority of commercial properties. As you can see, it consists of 6,800 kilometres of distribution pipework. Around 1,600 kilometres of that remains metallic, and you can see that in the green areas on the map. of which around 1,200 kilometres of that is targeted to be replaced with polyethylene main by 2032, and that's going to represent around an annual investment of 160 million over the 10-year, not an annual investment, rather 160 million over the 10-year period. We can move on, please. A complicated picture, this complicated slide, but it's just, you know, just trying to portray that we monitor growth and development across our networks, and where possible and in line with other programs of work, we will ensure that the network is able to provide capacity where required. Now, where we see developments that we cannot accommodate through the more generic reinforcement and capacity we have, then we have a connections team who can accommodate specific requirements to any potential customer. And again, I'll talk a little bit about the connections process going on. And just an example here, we've got a long-term project to reinforce our infrastructure around the Temple area to accommodate a development in Glasgow Harbour. And that's an ongoing process to make sure that we maintain capacity in our system to enable that. We can move on, please. So I'm not going to go through all of these. This is just a quick look at our connections process. So it's a very traditional process, I suppose, one way of putting it. You know, the customer completes an application form. We undertake network analysis to look at the impact of that additional load on our network. If needed, we'll undertake site surveys, and then we'll carry out a design always based on a least cost fit for purpose approach. We'll issue our quotation to the customer, excuse me. Assuming customer acceptance, we will then work with the customer to plan in the works for an agreed date and undertake the work and finish up reinstatement and everything else. So quite a traditional approach to our connections business. Can we move on? So this is just a view and to provide some information on what the customer needs to undertake, and there's some links there to our website. So, you know, if a customer wants a new connection or looking to increase their capacity, then they will need to go through our our SGN connections team. Now, these applications can be done on our website, and depending on the proposal, we may require some additional information and like I said on the other side, we may need a site survey. We need to understand the route of supply and the termination points. Where gas usage is low on these applications, we can sometimes fast track these quotes through. However, where it's a high demand application, then there's much more detailed analysis required, and we have to consider the impact, and we may result in additional works on our network to ensure that we maintain security of supply for everyone. I think an important point to note is you don't have to use SGN for this work. You could use other contractors that provide this service, and so the only stipulation is that these other companies need to be what we call GERS registered, and that's Gas Industry Registration Scheme. So, and we would then either adopt the connection, or sometimes they're operated under their own right. Okay, let's move on, please. So just a few points on sort of how we design and quote. So, you know, when we're looking at design, we will design the proposed mains or services to ensure that requested capacity is available. As I said on the other slide, we always look for the lowest cost solution for the customer. Now, although we will provide the lowest cost solution to the customer, we may take the opportunity to enhance the design, which will be at no extra cost to the customer. And, you know, because there may be opportunities for us to enhance the network at the same time, and we will take those opportunities. We can quote for different options should this be required, or raise a variation to existing projects should things change on site. And probably to that point, when we're costing our projects, there's lots of factors that feed in to the accuracy and the reliability of that quote. And, you know, we have to look at pipe length and diameter, gas mains pressure, service material, the road surface and the material to be excavated, whether traffic management is going to be required and the degree of that traffic management. Any specialist materials, legal way leave agreements, you know, a myriad of issues. These are just a snapshot, and I think just the point is understanding the job in a reasonable amount of detail is important. Let's move on, conscious of keeping up with the agenda. So how we make investment decisions. So, you know, we go through a broadly similar process, I suppose. You know, we have a lot of engagement, okay, on potential growth. We undertake some detailed assessments of the likely impact of the growth on our models. We undertake specific design work, excuse me, required on the network, and any reinforcement that's going to be required. The box is green because requirement for certainty is really important to us. You know, understanding the certainty of that load coming onto our network and the timing is important. Then we'll work through timescales, and then we'll deliver the project. And we just wanted to give you a sense on the right hand side here about some of the timescales. These are very indicative timescales, but if you're looking at the distribution network, which is the low pressure and the medium pressure that feeds the majority of customers, you're sort of looking at 12 to 18 months for us to implement investment decisions. If you're going to the local transmission system, which is much higher pressure, you're talking in the region of up to 4 years. And then if you're going to what's called the national transmission system, which is the highest possible pressure and it feeds power stations and that sort of degree, you've got a lead time of 5 years sort of plus. Okay, let's move on. So streamlining data sharing with local authorities. You know, data sharing with local authorities and others presents us with lots of opportunities and really supports our strategic view of our network. We layer this information into our models and we use it to analyze impacts going forward. It gives us that forward view. All data sharing agreement between local authorities and SGN are carried out through the spatial hub in Scotland, which contains all of those spatial data sets. And seeing geospatial housing allocations and commercial allocations enhances our efforts to work in conjunction with local authorities. It's a really key element for us and something we've really walked into freely and very eagerly over the last couple of years. If we can move on. So just a nod to coordination, right, and collaboration. You know, we know that it reduces inconvenience for customers. You know, time off supply, just general disruption. There's savings for customers, potentially reduction in reinstatement costs and reducing the overall environmental impact. And, you know, allows us to have strategic and objective alignment. So, you know, when we can work with local authorities and other partners, it's good for everyone. And generally, we can utilize it to enhance our fuel poor supplies as well. We move on. So very quick example of a coordinated strategy. So Inverness Canal crossing, we had some work to do up there to reinforce our network. We identified through some engagement with the Highland Council local development plan that they were going to be doing some works to effectively drain the canal. And we worked with them and tied up with them time-wise to actually get our reinforcement into through the canal at the time that the canal was drained. It would have been a huge job to do it any other time. So it really worked well. We got a sleeve in, everything was done, and we were able just to insert our main through once they'd finished this work. So it really minimised disruption and gave us a great opportunity to sort of facilitate those further phases of the project that we need to do. And I think that's me done, Michelle. So hopefully that I'm a little bit over time, so apologies.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for that. If we can maybe leave questions to the end of the three, but if people are if you could put them in the chat at the moment, that would be great, so we don't forget them. So with that, if we can move on to Craig from Scottish Power Energy Networks. Craig, you're on.
Morning, hi, and thanks for the invite to come along and talk about our businesses. Much appreciated. So Rachel and I will do a bit of this each, and I'll pick up the questions later on. But it's very similar actually to what's just went on. I'm quite surprised how similar it is, but it pretty much is. But anyway, who are we? So my name's Craig Arthur. I look after the distribution business here in Scotland as part of the Iberdrola Scottish Power Group. We call it SP Energy Networks. It's a regulated business, much the same as we've just heard in other companies. The only slight difference is we don't run as a function, we run as a geographic patch, so we do faults, general inquiries, capital connections, all of the elements of running the regulated business sits in the licence as such. So we do everything, and that allows us the synergies to see what's faulted last night, who might be connecting something tomorrow, what the council might think about in the future. So we think that running all together on a geographic patch allows us some synergies and efficiencies. So Rachel will introduce herself and then start the slide deck. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Donoghue. I'm just supporting Craig on this call. My day role is Head of Planning and Design within our Glasgow district, and similarly that regional patch across central and southern Scotland, which is run by SP Distribution, Craig's business. I sit within part of that, one of the 6 districts, so a relevant district to this call, I think, as Glasgow. So the slide is just the kind of first slide, really, I guess just knits together the picture that Craig painted there about the kind of faults, the approach to investment, and then our connections business that ultimately works with customers to respond to their needs, and is our kind of growth area as far as development is concerned in the kind of Glasgow city region area. But first and foremost, just to outline our approach to investment. So across that central and southern Scotland SP distribution licensed business that is regulated, we spend around £90 million each year investing in the infrastructure, the assets, and what I mean by that is very simply cables, substations, overhead lines. So all of that kind of asset base is owned by our company, and we have an obligation and a statutory licence condition to, ensure that that is maintained and it is invested in, and it's done so with, customers, and needs at heart. So we spend a lot of time, and particularly recently in the Glasgow area, although across the patch, on good project management, programme management, and making sure that we are knitting together our customer needs, the future of the network, the net zero agenda, and ultimately the life cycle of assets and what might be faulty and what might happen on the network. So there's a lot happening at the moment within the business to look ahead and try to get a better feel for where we need to spend money and spending that money appropriately. So all our projects and resources have been managed as one programme. We've done a particularly significant piece of work across the Glasgow area that I'm sure many of you at some point will have seen, or unfortunately maybe been impacted by traffic, but across the south side, and I'll show you an image of that in the next slide once we get to it, but we have what we've called uprated. So we have installed bigger cables and bigger transformers across the Glasgow south side network, which ultimately releases more electricity into the area. So that's allowed us to work closely and stitch in our customer requirements as well. Obviously, there's a lot of development ongoing in the Glasgow area and across central and southern Scotland, but something that is a key to that is making sure you invest money sensibly and release as much capacity onto the network to allow customer connections to happen. Because as the electricity network becomes more important in a future, especially in a net zero future or a low carbon future, it's important there's enough capacity there to meet that demand that quite frankly is booming at the moment. So to do with this project then, this slide was just to kind of outline a bit of the kind of stakeholder management that we're involved in. So regular meetings with all local authorities really, but proactive advertising as many of the other companies on this call will also be doing, but it's really important to get those messages out there. It's not, it's a disruption, but it's for the greater good and ultimately what will happen and what will be of benefit to customers across the patch as a result of that. If I can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this grainy black and white photo, just shows the extent of that uprating work I was talking about. So this is, at least a 3-year programme, but when you think about the kind of engineering excellence that goes into thinking about something like this, digging down on the Glasgow roads and infrastructure, as many people on this call will know, is not an easy thing. It's a congested part of, the central belt. and we've had to work really closely with lots of different, you know, companies, contractors, partners, councils, you know, you name it. So from Helen Street Primary in Govan right along to St Andrew's Cross and kind of Southside, Pollokshaws type area, all those cables in between that you can kind of see there in green, red and blue have been uprated, so bigger cables have been put in and bigger transformers at each of those sites and substations, so fresh equipment, more electrical capacity onto the network, and as such, you know, there's been connections along the Clyde side and the Barclays development, for example, lots of work with universities, work with the SEC, you know, all these different players have been in the mix there at some point. We've been working with them closely on their customer connection needs, but equally how that ties in with the investment that we're doing on the network and making sure that that makes sense for everybody. Okay, so this is just some of the kind of challenges and I guess, you know, the fundamentals of working on infrastructure. So excavating through main roads, you know, in itself, when it's these bigger cables, it's bigger tracks that we're digging, and it tends to be main arteries. So with that, you know, road closures, strong engagement with communities and councils to make sure that happens on timescale, partnerships with other utilities. So Scottish Water were a great example of a partner we use. So when we open roads, we like to only do that once, and something that will be of benefit going forward is utilities working together in a coherent way, getting plans set, getting ready for the future, and using those partnerships or agreements to do sensible things and make sure we're not opening roads twice and causing double the disruptions. That was something just alongside Ibrox Stadium there that was a really, you know, positive story, I think, for both organisations. New and bespoke transformers, that's just more about supply chain. I don't need to go into the detail of that, but ultimately just making sure we're looking at new technology with, you know, better oils, better for the environment, concrete that is, you know, used and manufactured in a way that provides less emissions. So, you know, we did a lot of work into that with the Glasgow uprating programme, and a lot of those learnings have been used in the future as well with our procurement and our supply chain. We've had, you know, legacy buildings, you'll see them, or maybe you won't, maybe you're immune to them when you drive past, but buildings that ultimately have been standing for a number of years that, you know, need work, or in fact we just need to get out of and demolish. So, you know, a bit in there about the planning authority and what goes into, you know, planning something of that scale. Our transmission business, so the kind of high voltages where you'll see the steel towers and the pylons, as you might refer to them, that's owned by the SP Transmission business, still part of our group, but a different entity. So we ultimately have to treat them, although they're part of Scottish Power, like a different business and work with them on the higher voltages, similar to what you've probably seen on the Scottish Gas slides as well, just about the interface between the different types of infrastructure, bigger to smaller. And then ageing assets as well, just an example of some of the stuff we're taking off the network and renewing. You know, a lot of this gear has been there for 60 years or so, and it's time to be renewed. I'll move on. So I think this is my final slide. I'm going to pop a link in the chat as well. Hopefully it doesn't get mixed up, but I'm sure we can find another way to distribute that. So the link I've just sent is to the SP Energy Networks Getting Connected part of the website, where you'll find links to application forms and generally information on that process. So what we do is we have a customer facing part of the business where, you know, you as a customer in our area can apply for a new electricity connection. That can be, you know, one single car charging port to a large primary substation that is feeding, you know, a large housing development or battery storage site or whatever that may be. So quite difficult to put a time scale on that because of the scale that we run there, but ultimately the kind of initial inquiry part, we've got quite a lot of information on the website now, and we do need to keep up with that because there's so much activity happening on the network and a lot of prospective connectors, if you like. So we try to put on information that will signal red, amber and green how much available electricity capacity is at particular points of the network. That helps our customers inform, you know, what they can connect if they're drawing power and they want more, or in fact if they're generating and they're pushing back into the network, because that has a slightly different set of constraints. and the network's not used to that. You know, when you think of an electricity network that used to spit out electricity and that's all it did, it just went in the one direction. We're now taking it back in. So we've got solar panels, wind turbines, you know, batteries even at some point expelling back into the network. So, you know, it's important now that we've got teams set up, and we have important conversations with all of our customers about the logistics in a technical but non-technical way that people can understand, and we can get them what they need. So the formal application process you'll see on the website, you know, it is pretty straightforward. You fill out what you want, you tell us, we have a conversation about it, and then we have, you know, up to 65 days, but sometimes it's 10 days, sometimes it's 20 days, depending on what it is you want, to turn around and do some network analysis and provide you a quotation. And that quotation will ultimately, you know, signal the cost involved in connecting to the network. Sometimes what we do as well, similarly to the Scottish Gas kind of setup, was there might be an element of reinforcement in which our business will cover. So a bit about the investment that I spoke about earlier is, you know, are there assets upstream that need to be made bigger to allow you to do what you want to do? And often the cost of that will be apportioned, and our business will pay some of that towards the connection cost. So the quotation part I've spoken through, and then the programme delivery. So again, you know, land rights are something we need to consider. So we need, you know, legal rights in order to put assets in the ground, which is quite self-explanatory, but can sometimes be a point where we need to work together with our customers to cut through any potential issues or delays there. But apart from really ordering equipment, ordering plant, setting up resources, making sure those contracts are in place, generally speaking, within, I mean, average jobs probably end to end in the process about 12 months, and that is, you know, typically a new substation. So a new secondary substation that you would find at the end of your road, doing something like that is probably on that kind of scale of time scale. Then equally up the voltages, depending on what it is you need or want, you know, anything up to a couple of years. And then the engagement with the transmission business, if you really want a huge connection and there's lots of generation to be added, we do need to run that past other players in the industry as well to make sure the network can handle you know, that size and scale of connection. But a lot of this is fluid. You know, happy to be contacted after the event about any specifics. The website has some good information on it, but does give you a feel for some of the challenges, but equally the process that sits behind, you know, organising a new connection for a customer. And it's an obligation we have. It's one we enjoy doing. We work with customers across the patch, and yeah, it's a booming part of the business right now. So that's all from me just now, Craig, unless you have any comments to finish with.
No, I think you covered it well, Rachel. Thank you. Just to re-emphasise though, we're happy to have conversations. So, you know, it's not faceless. So if you can frame what it is you want to talk about, whether it's I want to connect something soon or I want to connect something in 4 or 5 years, we're more than happy to have a pre-application dialogue. And often we should maybe have put in, actually we helped, as an example, North and South Lanarkshire kind of optioneer how to do EV charging. So their original plan came out at, you know, a price, and we were able to say if you moved it 10 metres along the road or put it on the other side of the road, then there's big reductions could be had. So we're happy to help and try and steer the existing network where we know there's capacity and there's value for money to connect. So I think you covered it well though, Rachel, so nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Craig, and thanks to Rachel, and some similarities to the previous presentation, but also just a different take on it, obviously within different industries, so thanks for that. And I think the points about actually when we work together, we can, if we work together early, we can all find ways of doing it better. It's that sort of early engagement, which is what today's about, and actually seeing faces as well, or knowing no future contact, so that's good, thank you. Okay, I'll pass on to Alan from Scottish Water. Alan, you're on.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Lorraine. One of the disadvantages of going last is that when you see those similarities, I'm just about to say the exact same as well. So I'll try and skip through this and pick out the main points, I guess, because there's some slight differences. In terms of Scottish Water, very similar. We're regulated just like all the other utilities. Our ownership models is slightly different. We are a public sector model. and owned by People of Scotland and ultimately Scottish Government. We answer to Scottish ministers. However, we're benchmarked against England and Wales water companies in terms of all our performance and the measures, and we're independently regulated as well. We are Water Industry Commission on Economic Regulation, DWQR, Drinking Water Quality Regulators with all the drinking water across the country, and also SEPA in terms of environmental performance. So I'd like to just give you a quick overview of where our key objectives, where we see our key objectives that's been agreed with ministers over the next 20 years. We're trying to take a longer term view of investment, because utilities are very much a long term investment, how does that get prioritised? Talk about how we engage with local authorities on your local development plans, which is really important to us. And I'll briefly touch on the connection process, which is pretty similar to what our previous colleagues have indicated. But lastly, I just want to put as a slide just talking a wee bit more about some other opportunities potentially for us to work closely with you moving forward. The three main areas of challenge for us is replace aging assets, similar to what you've heard. Some of the sewers in Glasgow have been there over 100 years, thanks to Victorian engineering, who they were really, really great. So some of them still work and operate to this day, very deep under the streets of Glasgow. But they really do need replacement now, and we really need to think about the long-term infrastructure going forward. Adapting to the impacts of climate change, it's happening. That affects us in a whole host of areas, such as flooding, such as dry conditions. It affects the raw water quality. In fact, last year there was a lack of rainfall, which severely affected Dar Reservoir and the incoming water quality in North and South Lanarkshire. So that's a big impact for us in terms of being able to treat water to the various standards for customers and decarbon activities to meet net carbon zero. So we're currently in year 2 of a 6-year programme, regulated programme, which will see about £4.5 billion of investment across Scotland. This will continue to maintain the assets, increase drinking water quality, wastewater and environmental improvements, but we'll also look at building growth and also resilience. One of the things in the water networks is that there's not as much resilience similar to other networks. It tends to be zones and networks and geographical areas. So one of the challenges for us is going to be to create more connectivity across Scotland, the ability to move water from the west to the east, where it rains more in the west, and also connect up areas. So one of the ones, and in fact, outside Ibrox there, it was mentioned, we're moving water that will come from Mulgai. It will go right across the south side of the city, where we're doing a lot of work similar to Scottish Power. So we must be flavour of the month over on the south side of the city just now. But that is the ability for us to be able to move water from Glasgow to Ayrshire and Ayrshire back up into Glasgow if we need to. So it's a really big resilience scheme for us, and way over £150 million of investment. This particular picture there you'll see is the Shield Hill Tunnel. It was completed. That runs across the south side of Glasgow, and that's a tunnel that's 5 times the size of the Clyde Tunnel, and it collects stormwater and helps reduce flooding and environmental discharges into the Clyde and other tributaries on there. So the good news, over the last 10 years in the 8 council areas, there's been about £1.2 billion invested in the area to improve these services. So a lot of investment in the Glasgow City region deal, and we'll talk about that a wee bit in a minute or two. Can I have the next slide, please? So supporting growth, I mentioned to us, is really, really important. The more customers are connected, the more business for us all, and the more prosperity. So we're all in the same game in the respect of wanting growth to happen. I've got teams of people who work closely with each of the local authorities, looking at development plans and feeding back information about where our assets are, what capabilities are, etc. And one of the things we do is we produce a readiness indicator, which is really just to give an idea, high-level readiness that just gives an indication of the sites that are agreed in the local development plan. Is there high-level capacity, water, wastewater, Is there any underground infrastructure in that area that need to be considered? And do we need to look at the local network capacity in the area? And generally, that's just to give customers and developers a general overview. This is all available online for people, and it's just to try and give a wee bit more transparency about you know, what existing asset capability could be. Can I have the next slide, please? So this slide isn't particularly helpful, but I read out something along there that just it has all 32 local authorities and development plans, development sites, and you can plug in the data and it will give an indication of that. And in the next slide, what I've done is, because I know these slides are going to be circulated, I thought it might be helpful is just to give you a lead name of the people who are dealing with each of the areas. So the person in the west will be Doug Buckey, and he's got a team of people who liaise with local authorities. So if there's anything that you've got within your existing plans, please just get in touch with Doug or myself or whatever, and we'll try and make sure that we're responding to that. Next slide, please. So similar to everybody else, we operate a connection process, which is a 4-stage process on this. I'll not go through all of this, but it's the key one out of all this is the pre-development inquiry. So that's where we really want to talk to customers early on this. So you don't need to be coming in for a connection. You just want to find out, you're thinking about development, or there's a new business coming into the area that might be thinking of expanding or relocating into Scotland. We do a lot of work with Scottish Enterprise on this in particular. Please look to that pre-development inquiry on this. Even though you've got a licensed retailer, which for business customers, they've got water retailers who bill and do the customer service angle of it. But really, when it comes to infrastructure, people want to talk to the system owners, which in this case would be Scottish Water, about what is the capacity element of that. You can do that directly with us, and that's really to determine what will be needed. And any potential banana skins that need to get addressed going forward. So we really want to minimise surprises later on in the development process for customers. Generally speaking, things to look out for is network capacity. Surface water management is a big one for us to look at, because gone are the days where surface water can be just put into the combined systems, because that's not the way to do it. So for 10 years plus now, new developments, we don't accept surface water from the development into the combined systems. 2 reasons on that. From a flooding viewpoint, it just exacerbates flooding for customers. Secondly, it's not a sustainable practice, because as soon as that surface water hits the sewer system, it then becomes contaminated and then needs to get pumped, it needs to get treated, and that costs us a lot of money on that. So surface water management is a big thing in terms of looking at new development, because in some aspects it might cost the customer a wee bit more to take it to a local water course or put it into a sustainable urban drainage scheme. And existing infrastructure, I guess, is the other thing to look for. Next slide, please. So looking at the future and opportunities, good news is that currently in our plans, with more to come, I suspect, but we're forecasting and have identified about another 500 million that will come into the city region area over the next 5 years. A lot of that will go into wastewater. It will go into combined sewer overflows right across the area to improve environmental performance. And the good news is in the Glasgow Clyde area, you know, we've got some large assets. So if you look at wastewater treatment works, we've got 5 large wastewater treatment works along the Clyde that service the vast majority of the population. And we've got significant investment in the water assets as well. So from a strategic capacity right now, we're reasonably well served on that. What we need to look at is local networks that's going to service that. I see huge opportunities for us in blue-green infrastructure. and Glasgow City Council and the Metropolitan Strategic Drainage Plan, bit of a mouthful, but it's really now delivering. This partnership's been going 10 years plus, but it's really delivering some great solutions now that's enabling areas to get redeveloped that previously flooded and moving away from the traditional, let's build, dig, and pour concrete. That's not the way to do this in managing surface water. It's about taking that water out, managing it above ground, and slowing that surface water before it gets to drainage systems. And we've got a smashing example that won awards last year in partnership with Glasgow City Council and Scottish Canals, where up at Port Dundas, north of the city, we have introduced a smart canal system which drains surface water from the area, uses a canal system. The canal system uses sensors to monitor what the rainfall is going to be, drains down the canal, allows the surface water to drain from that area into the canal system, utilising existing infrastructure. But what that's done is that's enabled 2,500 houses to get built in that area. And then there is the city deal money about the bridge that's reconnecting that area of the city back into the city centre. So you can see the connectivity that's happening. And we're really keen to develop that thinking with partners about how do we do these things. And Clyde Gateway is another great example of creating regional sludge ponds to allow development to happen. And certainly last but not least is maximising the net carbon zero opportunities going forward. I see that as being particularly good, and we're part of a group chaired by Scottish Power, Guy Jefferson, and the Glasgow Sustainable Group. And there's a number of areas in here for us. We're putting solar panels in at a number of sites. We're putting in renewable generation. We've got heat opportunities from the sewer system, so we've got 2 that have agreed and are live. The new AMID centre at Glasgow Airport, Advanced Manufacturing District. Renfrewshire Council are building an energy centre at Leigh Park Wastewater Treatment Works, which sits beside the airport, and that will take heat from the sewer system, and then that will distribute that into the new AMID's system and low carbon heat. We've also got a similar agreement at Clyde Gateway, and again with partnership with Spend, who put money into the low carbon network. Heat is coming from heat pumps and a CHP unit that will feed heating into the Dalmarnock area, and that's an agreement with Clyde Gateway. The other aspects are going to be tree planting with part of Clyde Climate Forest. And we see that as being a great opportunity for us to work with partners and planting more trees and using our land holdings across Scotland, not just with the 8 local authorities here today, but indeed with a whole host of local authorities going forward in forestry and land Scotland. So we've got big plans in that area. And last but not least is the future sludge strategy. It's not a particularly nice thing to talk about as we're heading towards at lunchtime, I know, but 5 wastewater treatment works. What happens with that is there's all the sludge from these wastewater treatment works gets pumped along the Clyde, and underneath the Clyde from Donoghue gets pumped all the way from then Paisley up to Shield Hall, up to Dalmarnock to Donoghue. Well, there's a PFI contract that takes that sludge and operates it, and it actually goes to cement kilns down south. So these PFI contracts come to an end in the next 5-6 years, and will come back into the ownership of Scottish Water. So we're going to be looking at what is the value of that sludge going forward. How do we create biofuels and really use that as an energy? Because the thinking's changed from when these contracts were put on. It was just looked as a waste product with no real value. Let's just get rid of it. So the whole thinking's now changing to say, well, yes, it's a waste product, but there's also a value to it now. So again, we want to be then talking with other partners about what does that opportunity give us in the Glasgow City region area, and really maximise that going forward. So that was a quick canter through there, and happy to take any questions similar to colleagues and anything I've said.
Thanks for that, Alan. And I think also a good introduction to what we'll talk about in a few minutes in terms of the way forward. So there's many challenges ahead of us in terms of net zero, in terms of all the work that we're trying to do. As you know, we are talking about net zero, and at the same time we're having a seminar where we're talking about increasing the size of cables and providing more power to homes. and same with gas networks, and then talking also about what all our water requirements are in terms of that flooding, all the other things. So how do we take that forward in the future? So there's a lot of work been done across the utilities, which I think is really interesting, and I think in the public sector we were less aware of, and I've become over the last few years much more aware of that joint work. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Colin Thomson, who's the Regional Development Manager for Scottish Gas Networks, who's been working with Scottish Water and Scottish Power Networks. So Colin, over to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. I'm going to turn my camera on to say hello, but I'm going to turn it off again because my daughter, who's on study leave, I think has just turned Netflix on. So a bit of a, not quite right, but anyway. So hello, good morning, everyone. So yeah, I've got a few slides to go through. They are a little bit, I suppose, biased to the gas network, I have to say, some of them, but there is a whole system approach, which I think I wanted to go through initially. And a lot of that's been mentioned previously with the previous speakers, and how we're working together and partnering around that kind of whole system approach. So I'll turn my camera off and right, okay, so yeah, I'll canter through these because I think it'd be good to get some Q&A at the end of it. So just starting off with that kind of future, that whole system approach that I mentioned, and I was trying to think about what does that mean, because you've probably heard different versions of what a whole system is, and certainly from a gas and electricity and a water perspective, it's getting more and more built into our regulatory obligations to work together. So, and I suppose in a basic sense, a whole system approach, means finding new ways for these different parts of our system to work more closely together. And that could be through, when we're building or upgrading it, when we're managing delivery on a day-to-day basis, or when we're planning what infrastructure we need, for the future at a local and national level. And so really basically it means working across the traditional boundaries of our system. And I've tried to summarise in these images, some of the work that we've undertaken, and with certainly Scottish Power, SSC, and looking at a whole system approach to certainly decarbonisation. We signed a charter with various organisations around those themes in that image on the right-hand side. And some of those, I say, have been mentioned before about looking at planning and planning scenarios, the investment plans we have, the connections processes. A lot of it will revolve around data and the exchange of data. And then, that operational planning is going to be vital in providing that whole system. And then that was the delivers to customers a much more aligned and efficient system as we move forward into the new world of decarbonisation of our networks. So that was kind of, a very basic, as I've only got one slide on the kind of the whole system, but I thought it was good to kind of get that kind of view across about how we are working together. If I move on to, I say a little bit about certainly decarbonising the gas network, again, it encompasses that whole system approach to energy. So I thought I'd just start off with just a little bit about the kind of policy side where governments are heading with certainly decarbonisation targets. So both the UK and Scottish governments have both set out their targets to reduce emissions and achieve net zero by 2050, 2045. And again, it's been mentioned, we do need a variety of technologies to achieve net zero. And we believe, certainly hydrogen has a key role to play in that decarbonisation of a number of sectors, including, domestic heat. And, it's good to see that certainly from a UK government perspective and Scottish government, that they're looking at the production of hydrogen as one of the targets that they're aiming for. And there's big opportunities for offshore wind production of power, 25 gigawatts. Some of that could go towards producing green hydrogen for use in the network and for other vectors and sectors as well. And we believe the UK government should now accelerate its pace and ambition for hydrogen, mandating of hydrogen-ready boilers for replacement in properties, and enable a blending of hydrogen within the gas network. Certainly within the next year would be a great progress and a great step forward. And so that will help meet, Scottish Government's targets of looking at transitioning over 1 million homes from natural gas to a low carbon alternative by 2030 as part of their interim targets. I thought I'd just, illustrate, some of the challenges. Can you still see my screen?
We can, Colin, but we're losing the sound.
All right, can you hear me now? Can you?
Yes, I'm wondering if it would help if Catherine or myself shared your presentation.
Yes. Yeah, if you want to try that, yes. I'll stop sharing then.
Keep all your bandwidth for your voice, I think.
Yeah. I could go and shout at my daughter, but that's not very good.
While we're waiting, we had so much frustration over lockdown that we were changing internet provider, but we've ended up with 2 different internet providers, so we've always got one working. So that so
that's good backup.
I was telling our colleagues in the infrastructure forum that they're missing out a business opportunity where people might have one internet, and both of them are fast fibre networks as well. It's not as even if one of them's dodgy. Right, you're showing the presentation's up now, I think.
That luxury, Lorraine. So yeah, yes, thank you. I can see the slides now. So yeah, I'll carry on. So I thought I just put this slide up about looking at some of the system challenge. And specifically around decarbonisation of heat, just to outline the scale of that challenge. The gas network certainly transports about 4 times more energy in a day than electricity networks during the winter periods. This graph illustrates, you may remember Beast from the East back in 2018. So it just shows you the scale and the difference in that energy demand during those cold periods. And it's certainly an area that the gas network offers that flexibility of energy storage and resilience during those peak times. We have about 23 million customers on the gas network nationally, and we need to ensure, as I say, that the energy system remains secure and reliable for customers, while we look at the decarbonisation of heat and moving away from fossil fuels. Thanks, Catherine. Next slide, please. So we undertook a bit of a survey, polling ourselves with 2,000 Scottish voters and asked them about the attributes they value in their existing heating systems. And that wasn't just about customers who have gas heating systems, it was a wide range of different technologies. So there was a kind of overwhelming response that 73% of them told us that they support replacing their boiler or their heating system with a greener alternative. But actually, when asked the question, would you pay for that switch, it dropped that to 32%. Said they would be willing to pay for that. So we believe this creates, an action gap between what customers say they support and what they actually are willing to do. And we believe, there's a strong system transformation through hydrogen that can fill that gap. Enabling customers to enjoy the same level of service with our current home heating systems. And it's about not ruling options out, and it's about providing choice to customers as well at the end of the day. Next slide. I'll just go through some of the projects we're carrying out and looking to deliver the evidence for hydrogen. One of the key dates that we're working to is the heat policy or heat strategy decision that BEIS, the UK government, will take in 2026. Both the gas and electricity networks are still reserved powers for UK government. So we're gathering and delivering a lot of the evidence now for hydrogen in the network. So one of the key projects we're doing is our H105 demonstration project. So it's an end-to-end demonstration of hydrogen. And really it's about customer acceptance of hydrogen in the home. So it's taking place in Leavenmouth in Fife, or I should say more closely, it's Buckhaven, not Leavenmouth. So that project has commenced. We've received the funding through Ofgems, through Scottish Government, through contributions from the gas distribution networks in Great Britain. We've gone through the planning and consenting stage, and we're now into the procurement and construction phase of the study. So as I say, it's an end-to-end project. We're using renewable power from an offshore wind turbine, creating green hydrogen through electrolysis. We'll have storage facilities on site through some storage tanks to give that resilience and secure its supply. And then we'll be building a brand new hydrogen network in parallel to the existing natural gas network, and asking consumers to opt in to the project to take part in it. And we'll also have a demonstration facility on site so that potential consumers can come along and see hydrogen appliances in a real setting. And we're hoping to, that first consumer will be connected by 2023 to take hydrogen. Next slide. So just to give an idea, just again on the H100 so the existing wind turbine is there, operated by the Ore Catapult, so it's a 7 megawatt turbine, and the site for the production and the storage is located on the energy park, just on that right hand image, and we'll take our network into that residential area shown on the left hand side of that picture. And we're looking for about 300 domestic customers at this stage to participate in the demonstration project. Next one, please. Thanks, Catherine. So what else have we undertaken? We've recently completed a study working in partnership with the Wood Group, looking at an accelerated pathway for hydrogen delivery in Scotland, again to meet the Scottish Government's 2030 interim targets, but also that 2045 net zero target. So that study provided a high-level strategy for us on the development of a distributed hydrogen production throughout Scotland. So looking at industrial cluster areas around St Fergus, around Grangemouth, around Mossmoran for the production of blue hydrogen, aligning with carbon capture and storage. You may have heard of the Acorn project, which is up in St Fergus, where they're looking at taking carbon and storing it in offshore depleted oil and gas facilities. But also that impact and the growth in renewable electricity and production of green hydrogen is going to play a big factor in the distribution of hydrogen around our network. And it's ultimately about converting our network to distribute hydrogen to consumers. So that project was broken down into 3 phases. The first phase is a brand new hydrogen transmission high pressure pipeline from Aberdeen, or St Fergus to Aberdeen. Second phase is looking at the central belt, and then a third phase linking those 2 areas together through the east coast of Scotland. Next one, please. So just on the wider projects and studies we're undertaking as well. So we're looking at building again that evidence base and collaborating with colleagues in different sectors across Scotland. So there's a series of projects and studies to investigate the role of our network and how it can play in meeting those targets for the Scottish Government. So from a renewables perspective, I've mentioned the offshore wind opportunity, so the likes of Northern Horizons, the ScotWind licensing agreements. From a low carbon perspective, we're working closely with INEOS at Grangemouth and the production of blue hydrogen. You may have seen that recently in the press. Actually, one of our other projects, which I'll mention later, is looking at our transition and repurposing of our high pressure network. We have a site at Glen Mavis, just to the east of Glasgow, where there's opportunities again for the production of hydrogen from either blue or green on that site. So we're taking a view at the moment, an early feasibility study of how that could happen. And we're also working very closely with some of the local authorities and started some more granular regional studies and how hydrogen, a vision and a roadmap in those areas can help decarbonise the different sectors. So we've kicked off a project in Edinburgh, we're looking to do one in Tayside, but also we're looking to do one around Glasgow in the southwest of Scotland. Thanks, Catherine. Next one, please. I'll quickly go through this one again. This is going back to the first phase of that new hydrogen pipeline from St Fergus to Aberdeen. So we've actually kicked off the pre-feed work. So the feed work is the front end engineering design of that project and that pipeline to Aberdeen. Although the heat policy decision is going to take place in 2026, we feel as a network that we have to be almost shovel ready for what hopefully will be a positive decision by the UK government that hydrogen is going to play a role in the decarbonisation story. So we're starting off, these pre-feed works around the pipeline, and if you move to the next slide, we're also going to start the pre-feed work for the other different, the other two phases of this the project. So looking at the Central Belt and that East Coast linkage. And as part of the Aberdeen work, we're actually looking at the conversion of the city, which could potentially be one of the first to convert to hydrogen. So we're looking at how our lower pressure networks, the below 7 bar, can be converted, the sectorisation of the city as well, of how a conversion programme could take place. And we'll do that for the other regions as we develop these pre-feed studies and take them into feed, and then that final investment decision to go ahead with the projects, as I say, based on that 2026 heat policy decision. Thanks, Catherine. Next one, please. Nope, thank you. Yeah, so just to kind of summarise, I spoke about earlier about the whole system and the different vectors and that system transformation I think hydrogen can offer. So it's not just to say about heat and industry. There's different elements, transport. We're using hydrogen, whether it's road transport, rail, marine, aviation, even power. We already do quite a lot of peaking plant connected to the gas network, which supports the introduction of renewable generation from a power system. So that can continue with hydrogen. We'll need that resilience for energy in the future as well. And one of the other areas that we're looking at is the opportunities for storing hydrogen, which I'll come on to actually in the next slide. So just to, this is my second last slide. So just to, again, another few projects that we're working on. I mentioned storage of hydrogen. Going back to that resilience and security of supply is so important for the energy system in the future, as is now. And we're seeing more of that as the world is changing in front of our eyes with energy security. So we're doing some work with the University of Edinburgh looking at subsurface geological storage of hydrogen. Both in the Fife area, there's opportunities, but more widely, there's opportunities in the North Sea to store large volumes of hydrogen to give that resilience. We've done a bit of work in the past with Scottish Power, again, the whole system approach, looking at the East Nuke of Fife, where we looked at the constrained wind and how that could be used to generate hydrogen for use in buildings, but also for transport as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at how our high pressure pipelines, our LTS, local transmission system, can be repurposed to hydrogen. And we've just received funding from Ofgem to go ahead with a £30 million project looking at a piece of pipeline that runs from Grangemouth into Edinburgh and how that could be repurposed. So again, working with Grangemouth, working with INEOS on that hydrogen production side. And another important area, again, very relevant to the cities and certainly in Scotland, is looking at multiple occupancy buildings and how they could transition to hydrogen in the future. And my last slide, thanks, Catherine. So again, looking back and the next step for policymakers, so we recognise the UK has taken a positive step in setting targets, but we believe there's an opportunity for policymakers to accelerate their pace and ambition on hydrogen. Making some of those legislative changes, including mandating, I say, hydrogen-ready boilers, in domestic properties would be a useful signal. You know, certainly to support investors, and also, you know, as government and industry look to move the strategy to implementation and market development, that could signal. And you know, certainly the acceleration of carbon capture and storage and hydrogen production really needs that coordination between the different elements that make up that total system transformation as we look forward. So that's me. So thank you for listening to me.
Okay, I think that's us in terms of questions and time up. So could I just thank our presenters this morning. I think it's the start of a conversation rather than the end of a conversation. It certainly opened my mind up to lots of both future-looking opportunities, but also been aware of some of the pressures that are on power, gas and water networks at the moment, and then looking forward to what the opportunities are. So my thanks for that. I hope, I imagine all my colleagues in the call have really appreciated that knowledge we've gained, and I think the advantage of the web-based situations, we can get more people to join us. It would have been quite difficult to do this in an old-fashioned conference room, and it's good that we've got so many people on the call. So can I thank all our presenters? Can I thank Alan? Can I thank Craig? Can I thank Rachel? And can I thank Colin? I've not missed anyone out, have I, Catherine? And can I thank the team who set this up, Catherine and Michelle, who have done work in the background, along with other... Richard, sorry, Richard. As well as calling you Scottish Power Networks a couple of minutes ago. I've now missed you out. Thank you. Sorry about that. Can I just thank everybody for all the work they've done on this, and thank everybody for the presentations, and I hope it's the start of some really constructive relationships as we move forward. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.